Hi there, everybody. Today is the 18th of December, 2025. It is, today is Thursday, and we are going to be looking at one of our deep dives into the stub styles of fingerstyle blues. Today we are going to be talking about ragtime guitar. What is ragtime guitar? Well, the first thing that comes to most people's minds when they say or hear ragtime is the piano playing of, for instance, Scott Joplin, the entertainer. It's a syncopated style. It's a fast-played style. When we're talking about ragtime guitar, we are not necessarily talking about the same music, but we're talking about music that is adjacent and has some characteristics in common. So the main way that fingerstyle ragtime guitar is going to differ from the other substyles of blues that we're talking about. We've done a deep dive on Delta blues. We've got a little material in Piedmont and Texas blues that are going to be their own deep dives later. We can talk about Mississippi Hill Country blues. There's a lot of substyles to talk about here. Ragtime is arguably blues, arguably not blues. People debate this, but what are the characteristics, the genre characteristics of ragtime guitar? Who plays it? How do we play it? How do we think about it? How is it different? How is it the same? There is a major defining difference in terms of chord progressions, first of all, and in terms of rhythm, second of all. We're going to go into that in a second. But when we talk about ragtime guitar, we are talking about one of the root styles that comes up in fingerstyle blues, and we are talking about a style that, however we categorize them, some of these players are known for. We're talking about, Blind Boy Fuller, Blind Blake, both very much associated with ragtime style guitar. Reverend Gary Davis, both ragtime and blues and spiritual associations there. So that's really who we're looking at. And in terms of resources, the things I'm going to be referencing here are, three things for now. First of all, The Complete Blues and Ragtime Guitar Player by Russ Shipton. I've highlighted this book before. It's an excellent book on fingerstyle blues and ragtime. Probably a little more focused on the blues, but the way this is structured, it has a chapter on strumming the blues, how to play acoustic, chordal, strummed blues. Then it has a chapter on fingerpicking the blues. It goes into some of the stuff we've been working on and talking about. Then it has a chapter strumming ragtime, same thing, but for ragtime style guitar. And then chapter fingerpicking ragtime. And then it has a section that I think is just called, favorites. It's called favorites, that talks about and gives arrangements of different songs in this genre and this family of genres. Excellent book, highly recommended. This book's biggest weakness, really only weakness, is the fact that it does not have accompanying auto. Most guitar books these days either come with a CD in there or they have a link in the front, usually either a QR code or a spelled out link that you go to, and you can get audio files, in some cases video files, of the song in question. So you have something to play along with, something to check your work against, something to get a feel for the song. Next book. This is not a guitar book at all, but it has, I think, a very strong explanation of what we're talking about here. That is Roots and Blues Mandolin by our old friend Steve James, one of my favorite writers and instructors in this space. The world lost Steve James a few years ago, before I ever knew he existed, before I cared about music, but Steve James lived right here in Austin, Texas. And my first fingerstyle blues guitar piece, Slow as Lightning, was a Steve James teaching piece. So his material is close to my heart. I love his writing style, and I love his kind of instructional philosophy, because he gives you some good concepts, he gives you some basic things to practice, and then he builds them up into songs. The reason that this book is significant here is because he explains the history of ragtime, how it works, what it's about, and he talks primarily about the rhythm. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. My third resource here is a video by David Hamburger, who I've also highlighted a lot, called Ragtime Guitar in 3 Steps. And he does a great job breaking down what's essential in ragtime, what makes it ragtime. So musically, we're basically talking about 2 things that make what you might call ragtime, fingerstyle blues different from Delta blues, Piedmont blues, hill country blues, Texas blues, all these other substyles and subgenres. First thing is a totally different kind of chord progression. And second thing is a characteristic rhythm. Let's talk about this chord progression first, because this is a little technical, a little theory laden. And I'm going to demonstrate this with strumming because it's less complicated and it lets you really hear the whole chord rather than try to suss out what the chord is doing based on a root note here, a third note there, a slide into that note. You know, it's sometimes very hard to understand what's going on chordally in a fingerstyle piece. So David Hamburger's example is very characteristic here. And what he gives us is an 8-bar structure that starts with, let me preface this by saying this is a ragtime piece. Well, he doesn't even really give you a piece. He gives you some very basic demonstrations, but this is a 8-bar structure in the key of C. Now, if I told you I was going to play, let's say, a 12-bar blues in the key of C, we all know what that would look like, right? You'd have 4 measures of C. In some cases, you'd have 4 measures of C, or you'd have 1 measure of C, a measure of your 4 chord, 2 measures of C, 2 measures of your 4 chord, 2 measures of C, measure of your 5 chord, which in this case would be G, and then F, your 4 chord, and then either some kind of turnaround or 2 more measures of C. So what that would look like is you'd have 1 measure in C, 2, 3, go to F, your 4 chord, 2 measures, back to C, and 1 measure, usually you have G7 as your 5 chord. The 5 chord's often 7th. F, and finish out in C. And we have C tunes like that. The the Mississippi John Hurt arrangement of Since I Laid My Burdens Down, which is also called Glory, Glory, Hallelujah. But you guys have heard me play that before. It's sort of a... So that's your classic 12-bar blues progression. 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord. Ragtime chord progressions look nothing like that. Instead, they're based on the circle of fifths. So if we're doing an 8-bar rag in C, here's the thing. We don't even start in C. And 2 of the chords out of the 4 chords I'm about to play are not even full-fledged members of the key of C. So the reason for that is because we are working our way to C around the circle of fifths. So we are playing, we're going to start on an A7, this kind of short A7 that we use in a lot of fingerstyle blues. Again, you saw it in that Steve James piece. So this would be sort of... So you'd have 2 measures of that A7, from which you would go to a D7, and David Hamburger in his demonstration kind of uses this version of a D7, which we're here on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. We're on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. We are on the 4th fret, the 5th fret of both the G string and the 5th fret of the A string. So this is just our open C7 chord moved up 2 frets, so it's D7. So to review, we've got 2 measures of A7. So it's A7 is because A is the 5th of D. So we are kind of borrowing these chords to work our way back around the circle of fifths to our actual key. So since A is the key we're moving into, we're moving to A7 as the 5th of G, if that makes sense. It'll all come together here in a second. So from A to D7, we are going down a perfect 4th, which means we're moving around the circle of fifths to D. D is the 5th of G, so after 2 measures of A7, 1, 2, we are on D7. 1, 2, and then we move into G7. Why? Because D is the 5th of G. So here we are at G7. Measures of that. Now, what is G the 5th of? If you've been paying attention, you know we're working our way back into the key of C. So it's only our last 2 chords in these 8 bars, half of the whole piece, that are legitimate residents of the key of C. But we have worked our way down by 4ths into a perfect 5th of C and then down to C. So the whole thing would look, and I'm just going to strum it in. I'm just going to strum really simple downstroke quarter notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 4. And our next 2 bars. 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, G7. 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, and finally C. 4, 2, 3, 4. And that is one chorus of our ragtime chord progression. So what's weird about this? Well, blues is like rigidly in one key. We pretty much have like if we look at a 12-bar blues, we've got the 1 chord, obviously, in whatever key we're in. In the case of the key of C, it's starting C, usually C major. So you got a 1 in C. 2 bars of that. Then we go to an F, which is the 4 of C. Back to C, back to 1. 2 bars of that. And then we would jump up to the 5, the G7, and work our way off and through F, back to C. Now in the circle of fifths progression we're doing here, man, it's pretty exotic comparatively, right? Because 2 of those keys wouldn't even be in a blues, or 2 of those chords rather, wouldn't even be in a blues in C. We would be in A7. Now, if we played an A in a blues in C, it would be the 6th chord, so it would just be an A minor. And it probably wouldn't even come up in a blues. It would come up in a country song, a rock song, yeah. But yeah, there would not be really any reason to have your your seventh chord pop up there. So the fact that we're starting entirely out of that with an A7, which is neither major nor minor, but kind of functions for contrast as a 5 in some blues songs, is here functioning as a 5 to the D, which again, that would be the 2 chord in the key of C. So what do we normally do with the 2 chord in a given key? What's the normal acceptable 2 chord? Just a basic minor. So we wouldn't be playing with a D7, we'd be playing with our open D minor. Or more likely, we would, if we were playing a blues and we needed a D7, we would take like usually our A7 shape and just kind of slide it up. That's a B, that's a C, that's a D. So sounds kind of awkward up there, huh? But okay. So that's our chord progression. It's very exotic, it's very different, it's very cyclical because it's moving around that circle in a way that makes sense and is repeatable. It also gives us some insight into some of the jazzier blues styles when we see chord substitutions, how they work, why they work. It's usually based on this circle of fifth. And a lot of jazzy blues, you will see kind of circle of fifths progressions come up, like in Ragtime. The second characteristic of Ragtime, and I'm going to quote Steve James here for this, although David Hamburger also has some insightful things to say about it. Where is that passage? I should have bookmarked this, but I never do that. This is embarrassing. Is it possible that I am in the wrong book? Let me check one other similarly titled book. This is Mandolin Blues from Memphis to Maxwell Street, another Mandolin Blues book, and this one is by Rich Del Grosso. Yes, okay, it is in Del Grosso's book, not James' book, I'm sorry. He has a chapter called Rags, Drags, and Stomps. And I'm going to quote from that chapter here. This is page 18. The rag was new music for the world, a blend of the rhythms of Africa with the melodic and harmonic structure of European music. It was uniquely American, yada, yada, yada. All right. Ragging was the slave name for the clog dancing to drive the dance. What was the slave name for clog dancing? To drive the dance, the musician altered the melody, changing the placement of rhythmic accents. Italian composers called for this syncopation with the term alla zoppa, or limping. Black Americans described the melody as ragged. The composer would start with a march tempo in 2/4 time, and then syncopate the melody. Anything that's syncopated is basically ragtime, wrote U.B. Blake, famed ragtime master. The rag kind of became popular on plantations during slavery as the soundtrack to a humiliating ritual called the cakewalk. And this is where the masters would get all the slaves together and make them dance, and the winner would get a cake. This is where we get our expression cakewalk, like something that's easy and brings you a reward. This is also where we get the expression take the cake. Like so many things under slavery where people had an opportunity to express themselves but weren't really encouraged to do so, this became an occasion for, satire and mockery of the master. So what the slaves would do is they would dance with a very stiff and proper and Victorian upper body, and hold their arms still to imitate the stuffiness and the detachment of the master. But with their lower body, they would dance to this syncopated music and they'd have fun with it. So it was this contrast between their expression, their entrainment with this rhythm on one hand, and the stiffness and fakeness that they saw in the European culture of the masters on the other hand. Syncopation, as we've discussed, I think, is emphasizing beats that are not the downbeats. So if we're talking about, let's just do a basic rhythmic rudiment here. So let's say we're doing a song in 4/4 time with a swung 8th note feel, right? So we've done this before, kind of. Let's establish that. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. So those ands you're hearing that I'm not playing anything on, those ands are our offbeats, and placing an emphasis there is to syncopate, right? So, and 1, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. And in a song like Pony Blues, for instance, we kind of have this pickup phrase. So that melody doesn't begin on the 1, it begins on the and. So your pickup phrase is kind of short. It starts on the 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2. Okay, so that's very common in the Delta blues to have something start on the and of 1. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, okay? Ragtime, a little different. You'll often have things start on the and of 4. So rather than having a pickup phrase and then the beat starts and then on 1 and it comes in on the melody, you would have like 3, 4, and 1. And that would be where a lot of your rhythmic emphasis is. So syncopation is very important to the groove. David Hamburger in his video, which I will link in the description, emphasizes very strongly that we are talking about groove music here. Music where the grasp of the rhythm and where the syncopation happens determines the feel of the music. And he says that's true of fingerstyle blues in general, and that's his biggest commonality with ragtime. So I have not really learned a piece here that I can play, but I'm gonna we're gonna kind of play with that chord thing we were doing. Remember we kind of did, let's see. So let's just get into that A7 shape here. So, 2. So this is our bass note, right? That's our open A string. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So that's more the kind of syncopation we're talking about here. Other characteristics of this music, it tends to be fast. So you're going to be doing percussive things with your fingers that aren't always necessarily melodic. So you might have, let's get back into that A7 shape. And let's say we hit the, this is our downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can play with things like muting the strings, and that'll put you in that ragtime space, that ragtime energy. I'm going to take a look at some of the tunes in this family and see what I can learn going forward. And in the next couple of weeks here, I'm going to do more of these genre deep dives. This is kind of a superficial view of that, obviously. Like Delta Blues, even though I've been working on Pony Blues and I played that at the beginning, I didn't give you a whole lot of musical examples. I talked more about theory and who the people were. I'm going to kind of do that level of run through of some of these other subgenres. So what do we have left? We've got Piedmont Blues, which will probably be focused on, Mississippi John Hurt and his style, because that's where I have the most material. We're going to talk about Hill Country Blues, so that kind of rhythmic, that sort of thing. We're going to do an episode on that. We're going to do an episode on Texas Blues, which is, predicated on a lot of these. A lot of these like shuffle riffs, same kind of thing you'd hear on an electric guitar. So we're going to talk about that. Probably talk about a few of the substyles of electric blues as well, but not immediately. So that's what you really have to look forward to right away, is some deep dives into these other subgenres. Then I'm probably going to step back again and talk more about how the whole thing fits together. So we're going to reprise some of our general fingerstyle blues themes. Maybe talk about some of the relationships between, say, fingerstyle Texas blues, that Lightning Hopkins thing, and some of the urban blues that came later that were based on those riffs and where that comes up. So that's what you have to look forward to. Thank you for watching this. I am on the verge of getting much more active here now that I'm used to my work schedule. Talked a little bit about the fact that it was my year guitar anniversary last week. So we're now like a week removed from that. And I talked about putting out an episode right away where I talked about some of the things I learned and what I might have done differently. I've been outlining that and working on it, and that's probably going to come out tomorrow. And that might be a multi-parter. The things I have right now are pretty good, but I think there's more I can say. So I'm going to try to do a standalone episode with the option of adding more later. Also, I'm going to do a what I've been working on this week, a weekly roundup. Show you a little of my progress with slide. Show you a little of my progress with theory. And also some of the things I've learned playing in Open G, which is going to be slide related, but not slide exclusive. So that's what we got coming up here, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends. As always, I appreciate you taking the time. Have a wonderful day, and happy holidays. It's coming up in about a week here. Bye.